Well, good morning, everybody. Hope you're all doing well on this Friday here as we start off looking in Canada. We've been talking a lot over the last couple of weeks about the extent of the wildfire smoke throughout Canada. This is a satellite animation from yesterday, kind of sun up to sundown. We can just see the fires and the extent of their smoke getting into the afternoon and evening hours just before the sun sets right here. And it's just incredible to see this. I mean, we've got a large ridge parked over the area with a little cutoff low that's just tucked away in this part of British Columbia. Can you see it there spinning? But all around that, just more wildfire smoke as these fires just continue. And we do have some good news for this area. On Monday into Tuesday, there's a short wave that's going to come through the Pacific Northwest first. It's going to bring in some precip, probably some storms to the northwest. It's going to knock the really hot air out of the northwest, and it's going to possibly deliver some rain to this area. So just one part of this whole story just to watch here. Because of this, we still have several regions across the northern tier of the United States that even early this morning still have these air quality alerts, and they're kind of dotted here throughout much of the, like I said, the northern part of the United States. But one of the things I've been watching carefully throughout this week is the risk of frost here. So we did see yesterday, of course, the freeze and the frost that extended back into parts of Iowa and Michigan all the way out of the northeast, and it hit a lot of the northeast. But today, just the focus this morning is going to be on this side of North Dakota. So this morning, just before the sun rose, I was out looking at the service observations. And as I look here, I get into parts of Montana and I see a 32. There's a 28 here, a 32 here, a 32 there. And so we did hit that mark, got right down to freezing just as the sun was rising. The winds were stronger to the east, which is what prevented frost, a lot more mixing of the colder air. Mixing of the colder air with a little bit warmer air aloft, preventing the strong inversion. But it was where those winds calmed down and everything just kind of bottomed out that we watched very carefully. So as I was recording this morning, this is about 5:50 this morning. These are the areas that I had. I'm interpolating all of the METAR data, which is what we call this. This is the Service Observation Network. This is where I had the frost this morning in the pockets here in parts of New England. All right, so just kind of keeping in line with that, I also want to show you just what happened lately with the precipitation. So this is the last 24 hours of precipitation, and we can see very heavy rains down in the southeast. And remember that low we've been discussing all week? A lot of rain in parts of South Carolina here coming with that, and that's going to continue to spread right up the coast later today. Much of this was associated with the frontal binder that slipped through, and I did get a viewer tell me that they had some snow in Manitoba yesterday. Thankfully it didn't stick, but some of this may have been the white stuff falling here. But then you come into parts of the western plains, and there's been just some extremely heavy rain throughout the entire month in Colorado. And you come down here into parts of Kansas, Oklahoma, and then Texas, some extremely heavy rain. And some of this was also associated with some very large hail. We had up to baseball-sized hail last night. And I think the biggest that I saw was around Amarillo right here. So I went and ran a report this morning for Amarillo. Just have a look here. And what I found was using the MRMS data, we had 2.5 inches, 2.5 inch diameter hail right around Amarillo, but some of the storms just to the north and kind of the north and west producing some very large hail as well. Now, this just kind of brings us back to a broader discussion about precipitation. And one thing I want to comment on, when I go through my videos, I want to apologize to anybody who I don't cover. I kind of been pointing out a few different areas I've been watching very carefully. But I did have a user yesterday say, hey, talk a little bit more about what's going on here in this part of Nebraska. And you're right, I focused a lot on Kansas, Missouri, pockets of the eastern Corn Belt that have been dry, and then how wet it's been all around that. But that is not to ignore anybody, so I wanted to apologize for that. But I do want to focus on this because this is arguably one of our most productive areas in the country for producing corn. And so we look right in this area and see how very dry it is and know that this is causing a lot of folks some very early expenses in irrigation in this area. And just to show you, let's go back to that soil moisture map. This goes down to 40 centimeters or 16 inches. And we just continue to see these regions pocketed throughout the country that are very dry. And it's important to know this because we know that the upcoming forecast, the remainder of this month of May, is forecast to be dry in a big section here of the country. Doesn't mean there won't be any rain. It just means it's going to be drier than normal. So there's concerns about this. But I would like to show you this pocket. I think it's quite important to zoom in here just for a second. So I'm going to go to my website, agweather.com, and I'm just going to type in Hastings, Nebraska. We'll click on it, puts the index number in there. And when we click submit, we'll get our own kind of custom forecast for this area. So I always put right at the top the stats, and you can see that right now, they've had 4.9 inches on the year. That's 4 inches off of normal, so we're at 54% of average. And again, we're here, but look at where the rain is this morning. It's moving through parts of Kansas. Now, over the next week, we are avoiding extreme heat, right? You see the temperatures going up, and they're going to touch the 80s, apparently, upper 70s, low 80s, with very low probability of rain through much of the next week. But what I want to do is just to remind you that if you come down here to the bottom, you can see the precip stats. And so right now at 4.9 inches, that would be the driest since, at least the last 5 years, which is what I map out here. And it's certainly drier than last year. Now, one of the big problems last year was just we maintained okay precipitation. That's this dotted gray line here through the rest of spring. We were way off of average, but the stair step up was good. And then it just flatlined for August into early September, and then again after that. So this area, even though we're dry here now, is carrying the drought from a year ago as well. And that's what's of major concern. And if we just look at the probabilities of precip over the next 10 days, we're waiting on the potential for something to happen way out here, May 25th. And that's just a single model run that tried to knock in some precip into that area. But we're dry for much of the next week or so in this region. Now that brings me to another important point. This is the 15-day forecast from the European model showing precipitation anomalies. And when I got up early this morning and just started to kind of look around and see what people were discussing on Twitter, I saw a lot of folks just saying, this is an indication that we're going to just see massive drought, and it's going to be a repeat of insert worst year here kind of thing. And I get it, because when you look at this and see these deficits, it can be just a major concern, because that's a 3-inch deficit over the next 15 days. Right now in parts of Missouri, Iowa, getting into Nebraska, Illinois, centered in this area. And what's important about this is that this was something we had been forecasting. We knew that we were going to go into the, this middle third of the month of May with drier conditions. And there was discussion about how the very end of May, we were going to pop out of this and start to see some better flow. But that discussion's evolved as well as we continue to forecast forward. So just speaking to the growers right in this area, what we have to watch out for is, if it's dry, is it going to be hot? Most of the near term, maybe the next 6-7 days, the answer is no. Getting into week 2, we do expect the temperatures to start to pop up in this area. But the second part of this discussion is that, remember, with these longer range models, the ones that like the European model, which we run out up to 45 days, 46 days, it's very sensitive to its initial conditions, and all models are. And they're that way by design. So when we see the model initiated or started with very dry conditions here, it's not a surprise when we see then the forecast for the whole of the month of June, which looks like this, to see drier conditions through a broad part of the country. What I want to make a statement about here is that these models, which I rely on them, I use them every day. We do know that there are just some weaknesses. This isn't a comment about the ECMWF or what we do at the National Weather Service. It's just reality. And so what I have to see in this is, as we transition into our summer pattern, what is not captured well by the models is thunderstorm activity. It can't. The resolution's too low. I don't know if you remember yesterday, but I showed you some of our high-resolution models, the NAM. We looked at how the temperatures changed when the storms popped. That was because that model is designed to capture convection. But we can only run it out 60 hours, because beyond that, when you include the convective parameters, that's one of the reasons, not the only, but one of the reasons why it tends to have larger errors beyond 60 hours. So we have a different style of forecast model, which is lower resolution and parameterizes the convection versus explicitly calculating it and forecasting it. That's all to say that summertime long-range forecasting is probably the worst time of year for us to see the best accuracy out of the models. So I just have to question the bigger things going on here and what it might be. So that's why I said last night, when you look at the June forecast and we see a lot of dry in here, it may not be capturing the full precipitation pattern from thunderstorm development as we go into the month of June. And what I always worry about is anything that just shuts down the Gulf of Mexico. And to shut down the Gulf of Mexico, you got to put a big ridge here. Now, if that ridge is just anywhere farther to the west or to the east, then you don't shut down the Gulf of Mexico in the same way. So it takes a very specific placement of a ridge to stop the moisture transport coming out of the Gulf. And that's our primary source of moisture if you are east of the Rocky Mountains. All right. So with that all just as a consideration, I want you to know that there's always an incredible amount of uncertainty. In fact, when I used to make these videos a long time ago, I would always say the long-range forecast is speculative by nature, and it is. So please don't take whatever I tell you about the forecast as gospel truth. I hope you put me up against other forecasters and ask good questions of all of us about what we think with this. So I'm just offering a single opinion, and this is my opinion about it. Now, I told you last night, I'm tending to side a bit more with what I saw from the National Weather Service. And I had a good friend joke with me the other day. He says, well, if you're going to agree with the government, then I know I need to start thinking differently. And we were just joking, but it was a funny comment to say, right now they don't have the same level of drought in the month of June here. And these are some of the best people in the business doing these forecasts, and they're not doing it lightly because so much of our economy, so much of the government operations are weather dependent. They have to be good at their jobs. And yeah, we all miss. I'm sure any of you can just instantly think of a time when we missed a forecast, and that's going to happen. The future's hard to predict. But I just want to make a statement here as you look at this for a while as I talk over it, that this this situation going into June is going to be one that's going to be in a state of flux. And just to show you one last thing, this is the monthly forecast, but if I take you back to the beginning of this and then show you it in 7-day chunks, all right, take a look. This is the next 7 days, and this is the 7 days that follows it. All right, so that's your 15-day forecast. Now watch, as we go out there into June, we see a little bit drier weather in this area to the begin June, and then you'll notice that the signals just drop. This is now through the second week of June into the third week of June. And do you see how weak the anomalies are here? That's why when I tell you that you go all the way out here to the end of the month, and we look at it and see, gosh, it's so dry. Well, it's really carrying the bias of the first part of the time period. That's it. I just wanted to make that kind of clear here. So let's go from these long-range forecasts back to what we're dealing with right now, which is still a lot of smoke and that frost that's hitting parts right as I'm recording this of North Dakota here. So this is where the smoke is going. Over the next couple of days, we're going to watch this weekend the smoke curl up into this low going over the Great Lakes. That's what's bringing in some cooler weather. And then you notice those wildfires continuing here to spread smoke across parts of Alberta and Saskatchewan into Manitoba. And then, of course, this pocket here of the United States. Now, we have good news for this area, and it's going to come in the way of storms coming into this after the weekend. But the first area we're going to watch for storms, sorry about that, is today down in parts of Texas, getting to the Red River here, over into parts of Oklahoma and Arkansas. So that front sliding farther to the south is going to meet up with this shortwave coming over the top of it, and it's going to roll, right through this area. Tomorrow, Saturday, we're going to push that storm threat here, although anywhere you see kind of shaded and gray has a chance for seeing those thunderstorms, and that includes running up the mountains here. But look at this. This is by Sunday, and we start to see the risk returning, which means we've got shortwave. We have a trough coming through here, and that's going to start to initiate storms in the northwest and into Canada where we need them. So I want to show it to you in the high-res model. This is the NAM first. So this is the rain. We saw this was pretty well initialized, and there's the system that's moving up the Carolinas, and here's the front associated with the low going over Lake Superior. So this is 7 a.m. this morning, playing through the middle of the morning and then into this evening. So this is where we're going to watch tonight for the strongest storms to erupt. There's our frontal boundary slicing right here through the eastern Corn Belt, getting up into Ontario and Quebec, and the low moving off the coast. Now, as we go through the overnight hours into Saturday morning, this is 7 a.m. Saturday morning, playing this out. There's a large high-pressure cell in here, and that is going to continue to push east. High pressure takes over, and most of the rain we're going to be seeing is going to be this weekend, possibly down here in parts of Texas with scattered precip to the south and running up the mountains. Now, as we talked about, the next 10 days has convergent flow in this area, and it's drier. And that's been in the forecast now for, I almost want to say 2 weeks. We've been monitoring this time period as being drier. But there's a big pulse of wetter weather that's coming into Florida. We need to watch carefully. And a lot of this rain is being captured here today and tonight. So this is right now what we're keeping an eye on. In fact, remember, this is the 0Z run. So some of the rain you see here in Amarillo and around this area was from last night. Okay, So we don't get a new run until midday today. So this captured last night. So I'd like to show it to you by first just adding up precip. And we're just going to take this out through the next 7 days and just pause it right there. So do notice that there are large areas of the country that are not expected to get precip out of this pattern. This is critical though. Need this moisture in this area to help with the firefight there. So from here, let's go out and look at what the models are doing. We've already watched through Saturday into early Sunday morning. So this is all dominated by high pressure, drier conditions. There's the wave coming through here on Monday afternoon and evening. This is the one that produces the storms in the Pacific Northwest. It's the one that brings the rain to parts of British Columbia and Alberta. And then you do note that there's a lot of moisture down in parts of the southeast and into Florida. And there are parts of Florida that desperately need this moisture. So as we play through Tuesday into Wednesday, just this pesky low here. And our pattern is really interesting because it's going to start to switch back to this. But part of the flow goes like that and part of it dips around this low that's going to be over parts of Florida in the southeast. And that low is what's preventing major moisture transport by midweek next week from opening up a big sector here to wet conditions. We need a big ridge here, and we don't have it. So you'll start to see storms popping in this area by midweek next week, and it's going to get hotter by that point. But that high pressure cell sitting here with the low to the south of it just means this area is not going to get that moisture into it. And that plays you out a week there. By the time we get out to week 2, I showed you the height pattern last night. I just want to show you how weak the jet stream is. This whole area by day 10, that's May 29th, just has winds in the upper levels that are very, very weak. And we talked about why. The temperature gradient is very, very weak across North America. It's warmer than average north and cooler than average south, which means there's no strong gradient. There's nothing there to drive the winds. Now it is the exact opposite down in the southern hemisphere, where a long extended branch, they have westerlies down here as well. It's just racing all the way from, this part of the Indian Ocean. Really, it's almost circumnavigating the entire southern hemisphere here. And there's a lot of discussion about what's creating this, and I talked to the Australians about this quite a bit. But this is our flow, and it's just weak, and that is partly why we look out there and we see that the week 2 precip forecast still says potentially to be wetter here and wetter in this area, maybe a little wetter in California. All 3 models pick up on that. But the progression of getting this drier air out, well, we'll watch the weekend model trends to see it continue to move to the east. And I got to be honest with you, I woke up at about 2 o'clock this morning and just jumped out of bed because I had a nightmare that there was another massive frost event. So to flip over to temperatures, in my dream, I saw this map, one I show you all the time, with this shade of blue that came all the way down to Texas. So I need this weekend to kind of chill out on the forecast. But this is this morning, same with up here. And again, this is a frost potential. So this just shows you everywhere that we saw temperatures at 35 or lower. So that would make sense given what I showed you here as to the extent of why this whole area is in gray. All right. To show you what the temperatures are up to, though, this is the min temperatures today. We're just going to play this forward. There's Saturday, big high pressure cell cooling things off. Heat is way in the Pacific Northwest, and it is a hot weekend for the Northwest. But watch Washington, Oregon, Idaho. There's the cold front coming through on Monday. Storm risk, of course, with that. And then finally some cooler weather there as heat reopens back in the midsection of the country. High temperatures are going to reflect the same pattern. Here's Saturday, getting into Sunday. Monday, there's that cooler air, presses now the heat to the east. Getting up to Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So a lot of early summer heat coming into this area. But as we talked about, you'll note that all the way through this next 15-day time period, we see warmer than average north, cooler than average south, and that's weakening the gradient. And as we play forward, we just maintain a warmer bias overall to the north and cooler to the south. That's been a pretty consistent forecast. Last thing I want to update you on is South America. As we play this out, there's the rain coming in this weekend for Argentina, parts of Paraguay and Uruguay. But the northern extent of that rain hits a pretty hard, stopping point. And it seems to hit it right about the border with Brazil. So without the monsoon, this whole area is drier. And I think what this might do is it might just impact grain fill, what's left of grain fill in parts of north central growing areas, but I don't think it's that big of an impact. And down south, it is going to be warm compared to average, and so I think this might just continue to take the top end off of the yield, but still, I think we're expecting big production numbers. Okay, appreciate you hanging with me all week, and I look forward to getting you new forecast information early next week. Have a good one. Thanks.